Well, here we are again. Border Patrol Border Poll Journal, Season 4, episode number
Well, I don't know. I'm running out of numbers. 26, I suspect.
suspect
I don't
26.
want, I allege 26.
Well, that falls right in with my alleged mind.
So it's been a great pre-production discussion.
Yeah, it's a very interesting time frame that we've come through. Whole month seems to have slipped by yet once again. We're looking forward to next month when we in Canada will be sitting on the edges of our seats, awaiting the opening of Parliament to find out what shenanigans are going to go on.
Shenanigans.
Yeah,
You think
you
it
can't
makes, you
you
think
can't
it's
say
going to make
work.
any difference?
Hmm?
You think it'll make any difference?
No, but I didn't want to give any false expectations that we're actually going to go back to the house and do work.
Um, we said yesterday we'll put up a list of things that we're going to talk about, and a fellow by the name of Kirk Lubimov over at X did us a giant favor because he listed, I don't know,
Several points.
what is there, 30 or so points there. Uh,
Yeah.
you can pick and choose which piece of bad news you want to start with first.
Well, I think first and foremost is the technology issues. Here we are on a wonderful platform called Zoom, because the other supposedly wonderful platform called Teams from that tech giant Microsoft is not able to meet our needs, nor is it able to meet my needs, because unless I buy a brand new computer, I can't blur backgrounds or add fancy things like you have there. So
Well,
I think
not
that's
even
just
sure
one
how
of the,
fancy it is here. I mean,
well,
we had I think maybe in a way it reflects sort of the corporate approach to stuff these days. You
well,
know,
that's true.
for 4 years we used Skype to do all our stuff. We recorded, we edited, we did all kinds of stuff. Very minimalist. It worked fine. And then somebody decided that that's just too easy. That's just too functional. That's just too efficient. And it's free. So we got to
Yeah,
figure out a way how to make it expensive, useless to people who don't pay.
yeah,
What else? So Microsoft, I think, did what Microsoft does all the time, is take something that people get roped into wanting to use, and
yeah.
then you bait, you set the bait, and then you switch, right? So now all of a sudden you have to,
Do
be
several
bold.
workarounds.
Well, even workarounds don't work unless you're completely committed to becoming a well and truly a Microsoft subscriber and pay big money. And
Yeah,
even then, it still doesn't work, to your
yeah,
satisfaction. I'm having real problems with the Microsoft Teams, for example, talking to my brother in Europe because
yeah,
the Microsoft setup in Europe, because what the EU has done is enforced certain provisions for Microsoft, whether it's Facebook, which is part of the Meta group, but
yeah,
all these softwares are intertwined. So you can't it almost becomes not interoperative between Microsoft outside of Europe because they just do stuff to it. It's the same
mhm,
as what they've done or tried to do, as you know, in Canada was to force Google and Meta and others to change their software in order to pay the government of Canada a bunch of money so we could actually look at reports from the US in Canada. And of course they told well, I think Google paid, but Meta told the government to go pound salt. Anyway, I digress. So, but the thing is that we seem to be meddling with stuff that works, and then you wreck it, or certain interests wreck it.
That's right. Which is quite a nice segue back to the list that we received here that just momentarily. We had a country called Canada that worked fairly well. Still on the world stage, maybe not a big player, but well respected, known. Last decade, we've taken that stance and beat it down to next to nothing. And now we're stuck with a potential Manchurian candidate who is going to pull a Microsoft on us to say, yeah, you were working okay, but I can wreck this and force you to do something that will be in perhaps not your interest, but other people's interests. And I think that's where we're standing. You know, the former prime minister's father tried to do it, didn't quite succeed. The former prime minister tried it and didn't succeed, even though he was kind of led and guided by the current prime minister, who now apparently is, if not God, must be close to it, according to all the elbows up crowd here in Canada. So,
yeah, it defies logic that with every economic and social indicator pointing south, the European Union Prime Minister of Canada, his numbers are either going up or is keeping steady. I'm not, you and I both agree polls don't mean anything because they're manipulated very much in Canada, if not elsewhere, but certainly in this country. I have very little faith in polls. I have more faith in the poly market ones where people actually have money they're betting on. That's the closest you'll get to a real poll because people have skin in the game. But the analogy, I guess, that we were talking about in pre-production is that when Carney talks about hockey analogies, we were talking baseball analogies,
yeah,
right? And so Carney is the Manchurian candidate, comes out of nowhere as at the top of the eighth inning as the relief pitcher or the cleanup pitcher, I guess, because 7 innings under the Idiot King has for 10 years set this thing up. So in the World Series of politics, what he does is he's running up the score against Canada,
mhm.
Canadian interest, right? But it's not close enough yet. You got to make sure that you actually win the game. So when the pitcher called Idiot King is tired out, and
Tired.
okay, and the team looks like, and the fans go, this guy's got to go because he's not going to, he's done the best he can, So now we need now we need the Lying King, not lion, lying king to come in and be the relief pitcher. And now this guy's good, okay, because he's only got to go 2 innings, and he's smart, he's devious, he's a good pitcher. He's a
Well, I
pitch.
think too, if he had using the baseball analogy, we would have seen him in the dugout warming up about 3 or 4 years ago,
Yep.
leading the former PM, uh, perhaps telling him to throw knuckleballs when he should have thrown sliders. All I think designed to make the former prime minister look bad, start to smell. He's already up at 98 pitches and he's only supposed to do 100. So
And the fans are getting a little
yeah,
nervous.
yeah. So yeah, um, I guess if we had a look, and maybe we're not Nostradamuses, that's for sure, and we certainly don't have the ability to look any more than about 0.2 milliseconds into the future to see something. But
Yeah, but the relief pitcher came from the team of mergers and acquisitions. Okay.
which again goes right back to what we were talking about before with Microsoft. You may like Skype, but we're going to buy it because although it works perfect for 99% of the population and 99% of the people's uses, we're going to ruin it. So that you'll have to use our product, which we know is not quite as superior, not quite as good, leaves a lot to be desired, but you'll be stuck with us. And I think that's what's going to happen here. We've got the current prime minister, who is, as you said, an acquisitions manager, and most acquisitions try to take down the price. So they're still going to make money, but they're going to knock down the price as low as they can possibly get it, and then start selling things off. And
Well, yeah, exactly.
yeah.
And in classic business models, if you're looking for an acquisition, you want to drive down the value of that thing you want to buy out as much as possible.
Mhm.
Curiously, this particular process isn't being done by driving it down from the outside. The inside's driving itself down.
Yeah.
So, it's a very different kind of thing that is going on because to blame the Americans for everything that's on this list that we're going to go over today is nonsense. It's got nothing to do with the
I don't
Americans.
see anything in that list that mentions President Trump, the United States of America in general or specifically. Yeah, that was just all brought forward in order to get the current prime minister to a position where he could gut the country.
Well, that's where the difference between an acquisition and a merger, because when merger takes place, when both sides have something to win on it. Okay, obviously the merger between the larger entity and the smaller entity is going to mean that the larger entity has a bigger stake in how the merger takes place.
And that goes back to, again, what we went through in the 70s and 80s when the immigration department was merged in with manpower. So for every one immigration person, you had three manpower people. But that wasn't quite good enough. So they decided later on, 5 years later, that they would merge the manpower and immigration people in with the employment people. So
And
for every one immigration person, you had three manpower people up against now 10 unemployment people.
that's right. Well,
And it didn't work well for the immigration department.
no, and that's right. It became a nuisance part of the bureaucracy for
Yeah,
those who ran it, and so it fit in perfectly with
goals and aims.
yeah, that's right. You basically took a organization and you gutted it. It had no soul. It had no argot. It had nothing. It was basically an appendage of a monstrously large bureaucracy,
Yeah.
and it was a perfect foil for people who wanted to basically say that everything is okay with our border policies, everything's okay with our security, because this other outfit, which has no real vested interest at that time, which was customs, it's looking after it, not to worry.
Mhm.
And so they basically backdoored so many things at the time. But we're digressing. The point is that
It is.
look, let's take the airline industry for example. You take Air Canada, which basically put Canadian Pacific / Canadian out of business simply
Yeah.
because the government decided that it was in their interest to have a monopoly. Uh,
Well, and the side of that was that Canadian CP, whatever you want to call them, had the routes to Asia sewn up where Air Canada couldn't get in.
that's right.
So they ruined CP so that they would have to or be forced to merge it with Air Canada, who would then reap the benefits of having the Asian routes as
And
well as
they had the
European routes.
protection of the Laurentian elites and out of Montreal
Yeah,
for
yeah.
Air Canada. Moreover, if people have to remember that when CP / Canadian was going to have significant investments by American Airlines, which is huge, if not the biggest airline in the US at the time, the Canadian government said, "Oh, you can't do that. You can only have a certain percentage of ownership because, that would be foreign ownership rules." So basically, they had that deal
Yeah.
gone through to this, we'd still see Canadian as an airline competing with Air Canada. But now, of course, the duopoly that they created with WestJet and Air Canada, basically, it's now the same. There's no competition. There's
No.
there's we have, and it's the same. And this is part of the reason that Trump has nothing to do with this. Americans have not. We're our own worst enemies. How is it possible the post office has lost $407 million in the second quarter of this year? It's got nothing to do with Donald Trump. It's lousy
No.
service from the
No.
post office, overpaid people, $1.65 for a stamp. I mean, come on, and no guarantee
Well,
that you get
and it's quite interesting on that point. We had a bill come the other day from I don't want to say anything in particular, an organization. Let's just put it an organization. And the bill came in an envelope that had its Canadian stamp on it. And that Canadian stamp wasn't canceled.
yeah.
So what's to stop me from taking this back to that organization and saying, here, save yourself $1.65 because you can reuse this one again. And it's not the first time that's happened. That's about the second time.
It's interesting you should say that. I noticed that a lot on the odd piece of mail that we have come. It actually has a stamp on it. It's not franked or it's not made. It hasn't gone through any system that.
No, no.
Yeah, interesting.
But then, oh, I got to take this. You'll have to hang on a minute.
Okay. Anyway, by the
Yeah.
way, while you were indisposed, so to speak, I got a thing on my phone that says latest climate hysteria. You ready?
Yeah.
Folks across eastern half the US have been wearing quarter zip sweatshirts and hoodies at night, with some even sparking up fireplaces and or bonfires as the summer winds down, thanks to unseasonably cool weather. In some areas across the lower 48, mostly the eastern half, temperatures have been record-breaking cold and the coldest in a generation for some zip codes. I can tell you here in southwestern Ontario, what we call the west coast of Ontario, it was 8 degrees Celsius last night. So it is suddenly,
Well,
wait, look at me. I got a sweatshirt on. I mean, but I don't see the maps changing. We had all those blood red maps all summer long when it was, like 80 degrees or 85 Fahrenheit for the Americans, or 30, 30.
coupled with that, I did read that areas around your neck of the woods, up around Timmins and the lake, are under a frost advisory warning for the next few nights.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, this really is unseasonably cool. I looked at the beach yesterday. There wasn't a soul on it. You know, it's
Yeah.
just the poor lifeguards were just sitting up in their stations, all bundled up, right? But there wasn't anybody on it. And in fact, we had a downpour. In fact, we were doing pre-production yesterday. It was like the heavens had opened up,
Yeah.
and it lasted for 20 minutes and then disappeared,
Yeah.
which is not unusual for this part of the
I mean,
world.
yeah. But that couples right in with those few points that we had on the list. What did it say there? That oh gosh, where'd that go? The cost of the federal public service is set to rise by $1.7 billion every year for the next 5 years without any cuts.
Yeah,
So now we're
that might
sitting
account.
here with Environment Canada that's issuing contradictory statements, and if that isn't enough to worry about, now we've got all these scientists that are out saying that the Atlantic Ocean currents could stop rotating.
I think what needs to stop rotating is little wheels in their head. Here's one that's much more closer to home for me here, Amherstburg, which is just down the road. Crown Royal is closing its plant that's been there for 100 years and moving to the U.S. I wonder if Mr. Ford's going to start taking Crown Royal off the shelves because
Well, that and I'd like to do a little bit of follow the money trail on that and find out how many shares Brookfield owns.
well, the company isn't even Canadian. It's owned by
No.
a foreign concern. So,
Yeah, but it's gone from 99% Canadian stuff now to foreign ownership. Will it be subject to import duties now? I mean,
well, if you dig closer into the report, they said the some bottling parts will still remain in Canada, but this is going to be problematic for
200 people's jobs gone.
that's right. And there was a big push a year ago announcement that they were going to expand that plant big time in Sarnia.
Mhm.
And obviously that's gone. It never happened. And there was a big
Well,
hullabaloo about that, and so that's not happening. But on our
that's
list
also
here,
coupled with that, though, Tom. We've
yeah,
got to look at the bright side. The government will have 200 people on the unemployment list that they might be able to put into jobs in Canada, provided that we don't issue more work permits to the South Asian community. And what were they talking? They were going to issue 300,000 work permits, student permits to that particular neighborhood, and they're now up to 845,000.
yeah. Well, look,
Yeah.
payroll employment decreased 30, almost 33,000, 32,900 jobs in June
Mhm.
basically disappeared. Job vacancies are up 12,100, and there are 3.2 unemployed people for every job vacancy. So there's a lot of competition. Yet, just before that, they say 67% or 66.7% of businesses are, quote, optimistic about the outlook for the next 12 months. Like, these are just diametrically opposed concepts of
Yeah.
logic. If all these people can't find jobs, how can you talk about, optimism in business when
Well,
you're
what that
increasing the
basically
size?
means to me, I think, Tom, is that we're going to get more foreign laborers in here who will work cheaper.
Okay.
That's what that means. And it means, if you happen to be a lower income or middle income Canadian, good luck on having any money or working further ahead
Okay.
because somebody's going to do it cheaper and the fat cats are going to get fatter.
Okay, then explain to me how you can be optimistic if the exports of this country dropped by 13.1% in the second quarter.
Well, that's because our current prime minister is going to build up our infrastructure tomorrow, probably, but don't count on it having any impact for the next 10 years.
Okay, then how do you explain that the actual stuff made in Canada and exported fell by 31% in the second quarter?
Uh, well, I guess that means that somewhere along the line, in talking in technical terms now, there wasn't enough chickens and goats to slaughter to pay for the rituals. I don't know.
Okay, I'm going to hit you with another one. The deficit now is $21.2 billion. Where's that
Mhm.
money coming from to pay?
Well, again, part of it, we talked pre-production yesterday that our magnificent leader gave $2 billion to Ukraine, which now makes a grand total of $22 billion we put into that economy, which is devastated. I understand that. But when we have our
Not
own
my
people
problem.
who, well, we have our own people who can't afford to eat, can't afford a house. Um, Surely to goodness that $22 billion would have been better useful here.
Well, add that 22 billion to the 43.7 billion that left Canada investment money in
Well,
the second
yeah,
quarter.
yeah, and that all it just gets back down to the point of we've got the guy who's in charge of the minister in charge of carnage. No pun intended.
I'll take the pun. It's good. It is intended.
Yeah, and with
Carnage
that all,
continues.
yeah, and we we just are fighting against ourselves. We've got a group of people who think that it's just a marvelous government, that if there was an election tomorrow, they would have a supermajority. Uh, I don't know. It's very strange, and I guess you're right. You've mentioned it before that until, like in our old business, until it affects you personally, until it affects you uh, in some way, shape, or form, it really doesn't matter. You know, okay, so they took away my next door neighbor 2 doors down in old 1930s Germany. Well, that's still a couple blocks away. You know, and then the next week they come and took away somebody from the block one away. Well, it's still only a block away. You know, that's not a big concern. And when they took away your neighbor across the street, you might start to get a little worried. But it wasn't until they came knocking at your door 3 o'clock in the morning that it actually decided, wow, maybe we've got a problem.
And no one's coming to help.
And nobody's coming to help.
You know,
We found that very, very clear. You know, our prime minister went across the pond several times,
four times. He's been there 4 times since being elected.
And he has not had any direction from Parliament. There's been no public debates. There's been no discussions. And yet
He's accomplished nothing.
Canadian troops on the ground in the Ukraine. Where does he get that authority from? You know, Canada right now is a country. How much longer it's a country, I don't know. We have a prime minister who thinks that it's a corporation and that he is running it as a chief executive officer, chief financial officer, whatever you want to call it. And he's calling the shots and expects things just to fall into place.
Yep. Well, he's presiding over a failing corporation because the GDP in the second quarter fell by almost 0.5% or 0.5%. The real GDP in June fell by 0.1%. It's his third consecutive month in declining GDP. And overall, in the second quarter, the Canadian economy shrunk by 1.6%. These are all bad news things. The only people that made money were the banks. For some bizarre reason, you know, and a lot of that is U.S. exposure because you know, that's where they're making their money, not making their money in Canada, particularly when it says here that real estate listings are you know, dropping like a rock because people can't sell stuff if even they want to because people don't have money to buy. And Canada's mortgage debt has hit the highest ever, which is $2.3 trillion. These are the nest eggs. These are debts. These are not assets. These are liabilities.
And we also know too now, again, getting back to our former business, we are bringing in, well, we're not bringing in, people are bringing themselves in by the boatloads.
They're self-selecting, as you like to say.
Self-selected immigrant class. They're really not adding a lot in the way of money to the population. They're more of a drain than they are. You know, they get their $80,000 a year that certainly surpasses what I'm making on a pension. We now are seeing CBSA statistics. There's a greater number of refugee claimants coming in from the United States who happen to fall from the LGBTQ community. But of an interesting note on that, I see the other Freedom Convoy member, not Litch.
Barber?
Yeah. Apparently he's filed an asylum claim for political prosecution down in the United States.
Well, why not? We've taken in 800 refugees from the U.S. apparently this year, which, you know, which is a minuscule number of people. I mean, what come on.
It is, you know.
But, you know, when we got 30,000 in different groups, I mean, it's just absurd what the refugee program in this country is completely dysfunctional and is a total catastrophe.
Everything that the government does is pretty well dysfunctional. Looking at Canada Post, Citizenship and Immigration and Refugees, CBSA.
No, look, the three stooges that went down to Washington on Wednesday, I should say Tuesday, I guess, who was summoned there to talk about border issues. I guarantee you, okay, with no OSINT information, okay, I'm just saying, that I'm quite sure that the Americans said, "What are you doing? You left the back door open. You got almost 5 million people showing up there. We're concerned. You don't vet them. You don't know where they're doing there. We now have a guy running around claiming to be a Canadian citizen, filming, Cape Canaveral comings and goings, and we want to kick his behind back into Canada, but we're not even sure if he's Canadian." Okay,
Yeah.
so. Uh, uh, suddenly the fentanyl czar was found. I mean, we've been looking for him for months, and he was in this group. And then the chief hooligan of this bunch, Dominic LeBlanc, goes there. He spends 90 minutes in Washington and gets his behind back to Canada. That's as long as he was there. That was some important meeting, to
Must have been.
okay.
Must have
And there's no readouts to this day. That was a very strange meeting, and nobody seems to know what the heck actually happened there. Well, I suspect what happened was they got the riot act read to them that this negotiation is going nowhere. Okay, and we need the Manchurian candidate, one Mark Carney, to start, getting on with what he's supposed to do there, which is essentially finish up the pitching that we used as the analogy at the beginning of the video. The cleanup pitcher has to finish the game. All right.
And, if he happens to, what's the old saying, snatch defeat from the jaws of victory?
Yeah. Okay.
That's the way it goes.
And I am also quite sure that when he does that and we become economically merged with the U.S. on all those lines that we've been talking about, if the elbows up crowd be clapping like trained seals and say things, wasn't he brilliant? That guy did it. He was
Yeah.
just playing Trump all along because
Yeah.
he sold out the country. It was just a ploy. And look how great it is. Now I can go back to the house I was going to sell in Florida and keep it because it's now worth exactly the same amount of money in Canadian dollars as it was in US dollars. And everything will be forgotten. I know
Yeah.
I know I sound like a hell of a cynic, but I'm sorry. It's just too easy.
Yeah, it is. But I guess on that note, we've beaten that to death. We've drugged the horse to the water and he's still not drinking. But
No, no.
just remember, we do need a little bit of help every now and then.
Oh
Hit the
yeah.
like buttons.
Hit the like buttons.
And if you can buy us a coffee, we'd sure appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll see you next week, Bob.
Yeah, we'll hopefully have better news.
Hope springs eternal.
Yes.
See ya.
Talk to you later.